Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. It's a bit of a miserable day today. It's very cold outside. It's not really painting weather outdoors, but I thought I'd give you a little lesson on watercolour, just to give you the basics of it really. I love watercolour painting and it's probably my favourite medium for painting outdoors, but weather conditions are not particularly favourable for it at the moment. So I thought I'd come inside, and this is my lounge where I live, and I thought I'd give you a few tips on how to paint watercolour. And really, this is one of the most important lessons of watercolour painting, and it's the beginning of trying to understand what watercolour is all about. So for all you beginners, hopefully you can watch this, but it's also quite good for more experienced artists as well, because they may not know some of the things I'm going to be telling you. First of all, we're going to go into the idea of mixing colours, and it's not something that's really talked about much, at least I haven't seen it much. So this is about how to mix colours, which is the fundamental element of painting watercolour, and a really interesting thing, and I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully you can have a look at this video and rewind it and go through some of the little procedures that I do about mixing colour, and maybe in your own time do some experiments as well, and to try and delve into this really interesting subject, which is colour mixing. I've set up my watercolour easel and palette in exactly the same way that you might have seen in my other videos, so no different there. And the piece of paper that I've got here is Bockingford paper, and this particular one is the £140 knot paper, so it's a cold press paper, so highly recommended. So if you want to go and buy something, this is the one to get. Right, okay, I've got my palette sorted out now, and I've got my paper laid in front of me. Now this is going to be maybe a little bit of a different idea for you. What I want you to do is use your imagination a bit now. So I don't really want you painting from an object, because I'm not really interested in you copying an object, because that would put sort of pressure on you to try and get it right, and I'm not interested in that. What I want you to do is to imagine something, and I'll tell you what to imagine in a moment, and then we'll paint it together. So we're really trying to learn how to mix the colours on the palette and how to put the colours on the paper. The colours that I use for my watercolour painting they're not particularly wide-ranging. You don't really need many colours to paint watercolour, and sometimes it's a really good experiment to have a very limited palette, because it simplifies it, and I love simplifying things. If you simplify things, that's a brilliant thing to do, and it just makes everything easier. Watercolour paints and the whole art world and the purchasing of things, it's an incredibly attractive thing to buy, and there's so many wonderful things to buy, and it can be quite addictive. I'll just try that colour and that brush, but I'm not sure you really need to do that. I think you can just keep things simple and limited, and the more limited it is, the more you know about it, the more you know how each colour works. And if you introduce 30 colours in your palette, it's like, whoa, that's super complicated, so I wouldn't advise doing that. I use mainly 12 colours, but my palette has 16 colours on it. So these are the colours that I use. These are my mainly used colours, and these are my less used colours. So I'll start it off. It's raw umber, burnt sienna, burnt umber, ultramarine blue. Now these two colours are the colours I like the most. Then there's cobalt blue, cerulean blue, love cerulean blue, that's a really great colour. Cadmium yellow light, yellow ochre, raw sienna, cadmium red, viridian, hooker's green. So those are the main colours. And then on the smaller ones, which is the colours I use less of, is Alizarian crimson. Now, that's not true with that. I do use that quite a lot, but I put it in the small palette because it's so powerful. The tinting strength of it is amazing. Cobalt violet, don't use much. White I quite like using, and black, very rarely used. So there is space for other colours, but I find I don't need them. And if you go back to my videos that I've done, all the colours have been done with this and only this. So that's my colours on my lovely palette. Great, so let's get into the lesson, the most important lesson, and something you want to refer back to all the time. So what I'll demonstrate first is how most people mix colours. So they get a little bit of blue, say, then put it there, and then they get a bit of brown and try and imagine the colour. So they've got their two colours there, and then they mix it together like that, and they create a sort of browny sort of colour, and then they pop it on the bit of paper like that. So, and that's all well and good. You know, there's nothing massively wrong with it, but it's certainly not the way that I would do it. What I do, instead of doing that, I get the blue, let's say there, and then I get a bit of brown, pop it there, clean the brush, and then what I do is I pick up bits of them from both, and then I place it onto the paper, so that what you're getting is a variation. So as you can see, you're getting a little bit of blue in there and a little bit of brown in there. So it's not one colour, it's multiple colours. And that's what I like. I like to see lots of different colours coming in. So what we'll do now, we'll have a go at painting an apple. So I don't want you to have an apple in front of you. This is an imaginary apple. If you have an apple in front of you, you'll try and start copying the apple, and I don't want you to do that. This lesson is about how to mix colours and how to place colours onto the paper. It's not an exercise in copying things. So what we'll do, I'll draw an apple. So just a little apple here. So just a circle. There we go. That's an easy shape. So here's my apple, the basics of my apple here. And what I'm going to imagine is that the light source is coming from that direction. Okay, so imagine it's like a football or a golf ball or a snooker ball, and just picture in your mind how the light would fall across that. Great, so next thing to do is to mix the colours. So what I'm going to imagine is that it's a bit of, it's a sort of green apple, maybe a little bit of red in it. So I'm going to get a little bit of yellow oak, raw sienna in there, clean the brush. I'll make it a green apple, so I'm going to get a little bit of Hooker's green there, clean the brush. And how about some red? Put some red in there, clean the brush. So there we got three colours, three basic colours there. And maybe a bit of yellow as well. How about that? Make it a nice crunchy apple. So those are our three or four basic colours there. Now, how do we place the values or the colours onto here? In a way that's interesting. And interesting is what you're always after with watercolour, how to put the colours down interestingly. So what we'll do, we'll start off at the top of the apple. So the top of the apple is the lightest part. So that's where the light's coming down and hitting it. So we'll mix up a little bit of raw sienna and a little bit of green, like that. And we'll place those at the top of the apple. So that's the first little wash there. The next one we want to do, we're going to imagine it's got a little bit of a crunch in this one. So we're going to mix a little bit more yellow and a little bit more green, and it's going to be a little bit darker. Okay, so there we go. So it's a little bit darker. The next part is we're going to mix maybe a little bit of red into it. There we go. So I've mixed a bit. I'm trying to keep the colours separate. So here we go, a little bit of red. There we go. That's nice. And now, when I paint, I like to imagine the colours of the shadows as being blue. So even though it's a green apple, I'm going to paint the colours blue. So what I'm going to pick is a little bit of cerulean blue. I love cerulean blue. It's one of my favourite colours. It's a really gentle blue. And maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue. So I've mixed those two colours in there. So the darkish tones really. So I'm going to take some of that and mix them together and then place them on here like that. Maybe a little bit more blue here. Okay, so that is my basic apple shape. So the light's coming in from the top here. And you can see that the light gets progressively darker as you go down the apple. So that's the beginning step. Now you have to imagine that the actual apple is casting a shadow here. So again, I'll paint that in blue with perhaps a little bit of alizarin crimson in there just to give it a little bit more interest. And so I'm going to paint that, and there's the shadow of the apple. And as you can see, it looks really nice, and the colours have been mixed largely on the paper. The colours have been allowed to sort of flow into the paper and move all by themselves. And that's the miracle about watercolour. It's such an interesting medium that the watercolour, if you let it, will do the work for you. And as it dries, it just gets more beautiful. So have a look at that carefully, and have a go at it yourself as well, and do loads and loads and loads of them, and you'll begin to appreciate the beauty of watercolour. We'll do another little tester of this one, so we'll do a new apple. So again, the drawing, there we go, round, roughly round. Oh, that was hard, wasn't it? That was a hard drawing, that one. Right, we'll now have a go at doing the apple again. So I'll do a green apple. So there's the top of the apple. We'll work down. Get a little bit yellowy apple maybe. Just mix my paints up. So there we go. Maybe a bit of red in the middle, maybe a little red down there. That's it. And then a darker green at the bottom perhaps. So you can just make it up. So it's really important this not to fuss too much. And you can make lots of different coloured apples. There you go. So it's turning out to be a green apple this time. And again, what we'll do, remember the shadow parts of it are more blue. So we'll give it a blue part at the bottom. There we go, a nice blue bit at the bottom. And there's your apple. And just have a look and see how the colours have sort of moved around and changed. And I'd like you to sort of have a look at it, and we need together to try and develop your aesthetics. And now aesthetics are really important in painting because aesthetics is what looks nice, and you've got to train your eye to what looks nice and what doesn't look nice. So the more you train your eye, you can look at your own work and say, that's not right. One of the problems of painting, of teaching students, I found, is that they've made a wonderful mark, I mean, superb mark, but then they don't recognise they've done a good thing and they paint over it and destroy what they've done. So the next part of this is to give it its shadow, again, a nice cool shadow. I might add a little bit of alizarin crimson again. So the light's coming from here, and here's the shadow going in. There it is. There's the shadow of the apple there. So this is the first layer that we're painting, and I don't know whether you can see it, that's really attractive. I find in my own aesthetic that's beautiful. That's a beautiful mark. So when you've studied this and seen how I've done it, what I want you to do is to go back to your own studio and have a go at it. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't put an apple in front of you and just paint it as like this. Imagine the light. So the light I'm imagining is coming from here. So it's sort of a high patch here, and then it's casting a shadow, getting darker at the bottom. It's cast a shadow on the table. You don't need an apple to do that. You can just use your imagination. So after that, so that's the first layer, and I think that the first layer is one of the most important layers. You want to express as much as you can on the picture, and then the second layer, that's when you start to, when this is dry, that's when you start to add a bit of detail. But we'll go into that at another time. So there we have it. Trying to paint simply. You've got to simplify these things. You can't overcomplicate these things because you'll get yourself into a knot. And one of the great problems of watercolour is that there's lots of teaching in watercolour, and that's great and everything, but that's also a problem as well, because Bill says one thing, Tracy says something else, Tina says something else, and Mike says something else, and your brain is like spread to the four corners of the wind. You don't know where to go. So the best advice is to keep it simple. Don't listen to everyone. Just, know in your mind what looks aesthetically beautiful and keep along that track. So here's what my palette looks like really from what I've just painted. And look carefully at it, and what you'll notice is that you can still see the original colour. So there's the hooker's green, there's the cadmium yellow, there's the cadmium red, there's the blue, and there's the red in there. You can still see it, and that's a really important part. Again, I'll emphasise what other artists do. They do this. Oh, that's the green that they want. Oh, isn't that lovely? But that is not what you want. That's not what you want. So try not to do it that way. It doesn't lead to expressive painting in my book. So keep it separate and keep it interesting, and that's the way to go. There we have the first lesson of watercolour, and it's a really interesting lesson, and it's something that you want to refer back to time and time again. What I notice with people when I teach them this lesson is that in about 4 or 5 weeks' time they've forgotten it. They've forgotten it. So I keep on having to remind people, no, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. Keep it like that. And then they go, oh, of course, that's what I should have done. So try and keep this in your memory and just keep going at it. What you'll find is that you'll uncontrollably want to go back to the way that you've been painting, and it's almost like some sort of robot that's occurring in you, and you just can't stop yourself. But you just need to try, and the more you do it, the more you'll manage to change and to go into this way of painting. Have a go at it, and then when you've done 5 or 6 apples, something like that, have a look at them and see whether you can see whether they've got better or not. And when you find one that's better, go back to it and say, well, why was that better? Why was that such a good apple? And that will help you as well. So you'll start to learn and appreciate beauty when you see it. And painting is not necessarily about techniques, and I wouldn't be too hung up on techniques too much, because it's a bottomless pit. You'll go there forever. Try and develop your aesthetic appreciation of things. So you may be painting an apple or whatever, but the beauty of the apple is what you're looking at. And you're trying to capture that beauty, and it's beauty which is what you're trying to tackle, not technique at all. So I hope you enjoyed that first lesson. If you did enjoy it, make a comment and let me know what you thought about it. And if you got any questions about it, let me know, and I'll try and answer some of them. You can see various other of my videos if you go and have a look back at it, and you'll see me painting plein air, these watercolours, and which is my greatest joy, to paint my watercolours plein air when the weather allows me to. So have a look at those videos, and you'll see hopefully the techniques that I'm looking at here duplicated in those videos. So yeah, just let me know, see what you think about it. Anyway, I'll stop blabbing. I've been going on long enough, and thanks for watching, and just subscribe to me if you can, and maybe make a comment and a thumbs up, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.